Thank you. Thanks for the invitation. Thanks for joining, to everyone for joining on Sunday morning. To this talk, I'm going to put my chronometer to make sure I'm not going to pass the time. Well, maybe I start with the disclaimer also Rupert made that I'm not an anthropologist, I'm a sociologist. But I think in the last years I have been learning about a lot about anthropology and approach when it comes to work with with the people affected by fossil fuel extraction that I have been working with in the last years. Maybe I can share my screen, right? I think I'm allowed to do that. Can I share my screen? Not. Oh, now it is. Yeah. Well, so I prefer to make some slides just it's easier to show what I want to talk about with you. So I'm going to be talking about the mobilizing for fossil fuels, for living fossil fuels underground. And well, I would like to talk more specifically in the case of Ecuador, where I come from, and where I do also part of my research. I do my research in Ecuador and in the Netherlands, so I compare two south and north cases. Yeah, but of course, like an introduction, we see this is a map of the environmental justice atlas, where we see that the world is full of social environmental conflicts, and not just about fossil fuels, but logging, shrimp factories, waste disposal, mining, well, you name it. So of course, this is expanding every time more and more to fragile areas. Lots of these areas are also indigenous territories. And yeah, and of course, it's a big problem. We're living with a climate crisis, but still, even when the catastrophes are coming closer and are undeniable, we are seeing that still is like sometimes addressed like in a bit of an abstract way, like it's everybody's fault, so everybody's responsibility. So that really hampers the option to recognize the actors, the victims, the drivers, and to do something more localized and more efficient. So that's why it is important to zoom in into the territories and the local struggles. And that's what I will do soon with Ecuador. But then before, I think it's worth it to mention, that we're living in a system where actually extractivism is behind all the way of we're thinking development, right? So extractivism, well, here I have a photo of mining, open pit mining in Peru. Then we see some headlines of the news that even now with COVID and this economic reactivation, even with the warnings of climate change, still we are increasing the use of dirty fossil fuels. Now that in the Arctic, because of the glaciers melting, some countries are seeing this precisely as an opportunity for increasing trade in these melted areas. So we're clearly doing something wrong here. And a big problem is that extractivism is behind this idea of development that we have. That is this idea of extracting larger scale extraction for supplying international markets, but we do it until the depletion of the resources, and then we move to the next one and to the next one. So it's in constant expansion, and we're just not giving back, right? We're just extracting, not creating any wealth, not replenishing things. We were just moving to the next territories. And this, meanwhile, we have big problems of inequality and access of energy. So this is a big problem we're seeing even when we have the hopes of a different economy, different way to do things with COVID. And now in Ecuador, with this a map that is not updated, but still you can see in the territory where the territory is divided in oil blocks in the Amazon, in hydroelectrics and minings in the center, and oil shrimp factories in the coast. So that's how territories more or less nowadays are divided, just in function of extractivism, of all the raw materials that we can extract, mostly for export, right? For countries like commodity dependent countries like Ecuador. So here we have, so Ecuador has been extracting oil since the 60s and end of the 60s. And Ecuador is an oil-dependent country, so state is pushing every time more for oil extraction because this is seen as a condition for development. And of course, this is coming with lots of struggles. And I think climate change also now, we see the impacts, but it's like accumulation also, lots of local struggles and lots of impacts largely ignored for decades, right? Countries like Ecuador, for example, have people in the Amazon that have been already trying to raise their voices because they are living in the impacts of oil extraction, with oil pollution, pollution of air, of water, of soil, displacement, human rights violations, disease, for decades and decades. So, of course, when Ecuador is such an oil-dependent country, is an extra challenge for the social mobilization to try to contest this, right? And of course, not everybody is struggling for leaving fossil fuels on the ground, because we see, like what Rupert was saying, also there are lots of shades there in between, right? So some people want to protest because they are not going to get enough benefits. There are lots of clientelar relationships, lots of things in between that are challenges in the moment of mobilizing against fossil fuels as well. But of course, I'm going to talk more on the resistance, on the people that are contesting the fossil fuel industry. And for that, of course, it's important to see like the place-based mobilization. So the mobilizations that are happening on the extraction sites. Because if we see, well, coming back to this, these are territories where people are living and they are protesting because of their material survival, but also their identity, their symbolic survival as cultures. Lots of these indigenous nationalities are threatened. And and of course, like in Latin America and lots of countries in the South, environmental defenders are getting the burdens, and also they are dying. Well, you might see in Colombia and Brazil, those are the main countries that are the most risky places for being an environmental defender, but also in Ecuador. So then you can think the differences between struggling for fossil fuels, leaving fossil fuels on the ground in the South and in the North. They have also different consequences and risks. And then we have, for example, the case of the Guarani indigenous people in Ecuador. So here they are celebrating. They got a victory in the judicial arena, but here they are asking recognition for the free, prior, informed consent. But also when they are, this is one of the strategies they use to go to the courts, because the justice is not always independent and lots of problems sometimes. But also they are struggling for something else that goes beyond this free, prior, informed consent, that is the right to participate, the right to decide, to have a decision about their livelihoods, about their territories. Also, they complain because they haven't had there's an unequal distribution of their benefits that go to a couple of people, a couple of cities, and they get the burdens, but also recognition of their knowledges, of their identities, of the way of being, of the way they want to continue living. Of course, would improve the rights. But they are also doing something interesting, that is not just them, but the social movement in Ecuador, I think in Latin America and in many other countries, that are trying to bring nature into politics. They are trying to talk about nature in the political debate and bring in other ideas of what we are doing with our societies so divided from nature. And of course, it's not for romanticizing, but it's bringing new narratives to this resistance, and not just as something that belongs to indigenous people, right? So for example, maybe some of you know that Ecuador is the first country that has in its constitution the rights of nature. So it says, nature, Pachamama, where life is reproduced and realized, is entitled to respect for its existence and for the maintenance and regeneration of its life cycle, structure, functions, and evolutionary process. So of course, this is, I mean, you can say a lot if this is working or not, because Ecuador has been pushing more into large scale mining and oil. But at least here you see some opportunities that the social movements and the people are trying to push to get some recognition and to trying to get new elements into debate. And it brings us, of course, the idea that nature goes way beyond a monocultural definition of nature, that there is a plurality of ways to interact, to see nature, not just as natural resources, right? So they posit things like, are they equivalents? Are they monetary equivalents? Or there are things that are sacred that have other meanings for people? And this made us think that beyond indigenous societies, how we are governing nature, how we are approaching to nature as societies, and how we are coexisting with our ecosystems. So yeah, this is still declarative, like also lots of things in the Constitution nowadays. But some other interesting thing that came up in those years when the new Constitution was drafted is the debate also coming from Latin America and other people in other countries, in other continents, is the idea, okay, well, do we need an alternative development or actually an alternative to development? Because all the adjectives we put before development, right? Sustainable, inclusive, human, green. At the end, we are still grounded in the idea of societies and nature divided as a linear way to path to progress, and everybody aiming to the same, more or less. Everybody should have the same desire to approach to the same direction. And this is based, of course, nowadays still on endless economic growth. So this this idea of, do we actually need to look for an alternative to development is present also in the discussion of social mobilization in Ecuador and in Latin America. And we see, when we talk about the contributions of the social movements to leave fossil fuels on the ground, of course, we see there are lots of strategies, right? And depend on the context, on the political culture of the countries they are struggling. So that's why it's not the same, well, in the north or in the south, you have lots of context there. But most of the movements, they try to apply some strategies, a combination of some strategies. Some manage to have like a politicized, wide mass organization. Some others don't, of course, depending on the time. The presentation of non-modernistic frames, like this, for example, idea of sacredness, spirituality, some things that at least break a bit with the idea of resistance, and the enterprises or states don't know how to react to this, at least for a while. Disruptive protest, that's what Extinction Rebellion has been doing also, and in Ecuador also there's a lot of disruptive protests so that they get into the media, for example. Lots of networking inside the country, but also internationally. That's also a strength. And also some use this combination of institutional politics and judicial, electoral, a bit more in the institutional side, right? A bit trying to get into the state, like, for example, with this recognition in the Constitution of some laws. Still, there are some things that in combination can work better, and call the attention of different people that work from different frames also. But we see there's some people that do research on living fossil fuels on the ground, social movements, and they say that about a quarter of the projects that face social resistance have been cancelled, paused, or delayed. So that's pretty good. They are avoiding lots of carbon dioxide, lots of emissions. But I think there are also other ways to see the efficiency, or to see the contributions of social movements that sometimes are a bit more imperceptible, more difficult to grasp, and that take time. Because social movements are also working permanently on expanding the idea of what is political, what is worthy of contestation, what is not just a technicality, like the technical part of extraction, but what is political, what has to be in the political debate, and define lots of meanings, lots of narratives, and they are trying to change, to bring lots of alternative meanings to the conversation, and also to resignify and to bring new ones. And with this, they are actually challenging power, and maybe they are helping to open the space for new political practices as well. So in this sense, they work as intermediaries, like brokers between the cultural and the political. And with this, they are constantly working into making ideas more pervasive, bringing new solidarities, also new empathies, new mindsets, new practices. And I think that's something that is happening, maybe with the new generations, we can see it more, but that's something that the social movements have been doing a lot, expanding new meanings. Of course, there we have to see these questions that Rupert was bringing about, how you include and you don't create actually a polarization, of course. But I think that this is an important contribution of social movements there. And and for wrapping up, just to say that I think that's important to keep always in coordination from the South and North struggles, that they can inform each other. And I would say especially that the struggles from the North can learn, and from the struggles also in the South, because that's where most of the extraction sites are, and where different meanings are being contested and are being brought into political action. And this is a plus, because otherwise, I think if we are not contesting the idea of development and the idea of this nature-society divide, the idea of how we coexist with nature, there might be a risk that then we are going to support an energy transition that is just going to swap the energy sources, but for the same economic growth, for the same lifestyles. And at the end, we can create new inequalities, to create new conflicts, or to or worse, make worse some. Sorry, my chronometer is sounding okay. So we're going to ending up doing things worse, right? So I think that's why it's important to keep these two links together, and with a big interest on the struggles in the South. And then you see there are some things happening, of course, like this contestation of development in the South, like the good living, the buen vivir that I presented, that is in the Ecuadorian Constitution. You have some equivalences here, people working on the idea of degrowth, right? Because for the South, it's not always possible to degrowth when there are societies that still need some basic living conditions. But the North can maybe start thinking on degrowth and leaving this space for the people who are still looking for access to energy, for example. The idea of ecocide that is recognized like crime, the ideas of rights of nature that having also going on in New Zealand. Some people start thinking, maybe also here in some rivers in the Netherlands or in Colombia. So these are ideas, of course, not without challenge, but this is how our ideas can connect and travel from north to south and vice versa, and try to open a new senses of that really contest this modernistic divide between nature and society, and the idea that we are having on energy transition and development that maybe is not politicized enough, or it's not clear enough that we're thinking out of the box, right? So with that, I would like to close, just highlighting that it's important to keep solidarities between the local challenges and also the global challenges, right? And the actors there that are involved in these struggles and resistances. So with this, I am.
Thank you so much, Carolina.